a fifth-round pick, a $230 million quarterback, and one of the most unexpected power struggles in NFL history quietly unfolding inside a Cleveland Browns facility that has seen more quarterback disasters than any franchise deserves. Here is what makes this story different from every other training camp battle you have heard about. Nobody saw this coming. Not the analysts, not the insiders, not even the people inside that building who thought they already knew how this was going to end. A rookie who was supposed to be grateful just to make the roster is now forcing a conversation that the entire league is paying attention to. Drop a one-word answer in the comments right now. Who wins this job, Sanders or Watson? Just one word. Let us see where Gridiron Ground stands on this. Because what happened between draft night 2025 and this moment is one of the most remarkable turnaround stories the NFL has produced in years. A young quarterback who sat alone watching his dreams get delayed round after round after round, quietly building something nobody expected him to build this fast. And the most shocking part of all of this, the Browns might actually let him have it. Stay locked in. This story goes deeper than you think.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
To understand what Shedeur Sanders is fighting for right now, you have to go back to the night that almost broke him before his career even started. April 2025. The NFL draft is rolling through its first round, and the football world is watching closely because Shedeur Sanders is supposed to be one of the headliners. The son of Hall of Fame cornerback and Colorado head coach Deion Sanders had spent his college years under a microscope that would have cracked most quarterbacks his age. He carried a Colorado rebuild on his back, posted massive numbers, drew comparisons to quarterbacks who went in the top 10, and entered draft week with mock draft projections placing him anywhere from the 3rd to the 5th overall pick. The football world had written a specific story for him. First round, big handshake moment, cameras catching a young man living out his dream. That was the script everyone expected. Then the first round happened, and his name was never called. 32 picks, 32 teams, not one of them took Shedeur Sanders. Now understand what that room feels like. Every prospect sitting in that green room or watching from home with their family around them goes through a version of the same experience when rounds start passing without their name being called. But Sanders was different. He had a target on his back coming in. He was the most visible prospect in the draft because of his father, because of the Colorado story, because of the way the media had framed his entire journey. So when round one ended without him, the cameras did not look away. They stayed locked on him. Every expression, every moment of quiet, every second of waiting became content for the entire football world to consume and analyze and debate. Round 2 came and went. Still nothing. Round 3 produced the same silence. By round 4, the narrative had already shifted completely. Pundits who had spent months projecting him as a high first-round pick were now scrambling to explain what went wrong. Concerns about his footwork, his relationship with teams during the interview process, questions about fit and attitude all started flooding sports media. The story being written about Shedeur Sanders in real time was one of collapse, of a prospect who arrived with enormous hype and left with a damaged reputation before playing a single professional snap. Round 5 finally brought the call. The Cleveland Browns traded up to select him 144th overall. 144. A number that represents how far the perception of his value had fallen from where everyone assumed he would land. Here is what matters about that moment, though. The pick itself was not the story. What Sanders did with the emotion of that night was the story. Because there is a version of a young quarterback who internalizes a slide like that and lets it quietly poison everything that comes after. The doubt creeps in, the chip on the shoulder becomes too heavy to carry productively, and the career never recovers from the psychological weight of being passed over by the entire league. Sanders chose a different response, and the people around him noticed it almost immediately. When he arrived in Cleveland, there was no visible bitterness, no public complaints, no dramatic statements about proving people wrong. Just a quiet, focused energy that the Browns' coaching staff picked up on early. That energy was not loud, but it was consistent. And in a building that has watched quarterback after quarterback cycle through without leaving anything lasting behind, consistency is the rarest thing in the world. That draft night did not end Shedeur Sanders, it started him. But the road waiting for him in Cleveland was anything but clear. Cleveland is a city that loves its football with a ferocity that few fan bases in the league can match. But for quarterbacks, it has historically been one of the hardest places in the NFL to survive, let alone thrive. Since 1999, the Browns have started 40 different quarterbacks. Read that number again, 40. In a league where sustained success at the position is the single biggest predictor of winning, Cleveland has burned through more signal callers than almost any franchise in modern NFL history. Names that came in with promise and left with question marks. Names that arrived as veterans and departed as cautionary tales. The quarterback position in Cleveland has functioned less like a cornerstone and more like a revolving door with a broken hinge. Into that environment walked a fifth-round rookie who was already carrying the weight of the most public draft slide in recent memory. The quarterback room Sanders entered was not exactly welcoming territory for someone trying to carve out a future. Deshaun Watson sat at the top of the depth chart, backed by one of the most expensive contracts in NFL history at $230 million fully guaranteed. Watson was a three-time Pro Bowler, a former #1 overall pick, a quarterback who at his peak was considered one of the 2 or 3 most talented players in the entire league. Even in a diminished state coming off injuries and legal controversies that had kept him away from the game, Watson's presence in that building carried enormous weight, both financially and symbolically. Alongside Watson sat Kenny Pickett, a former first-round pick himself with starting experience in Pittsburgh, and Dillon Gabriel, another option the organization had brought in to add competition and depth. For a fifth-round rookie who had just fallen through 5 rounds of public humiliation on national television, this was not a situation that screamed opportunity.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Most people around the league looked at that depth chart and reached the same conclusion. Sanders was a developmental pick, a project, someone the Browns selected with enough raw talent to justify a late-round gamble, but with no realistic expectation that he would see meaningful action anytime soon, if ever. His job in year 1 was to learn the system, stay healthy, keep his head down, and hope that injuries or circumstances created a chance somewhere down the road. That is the reality most fifth-round quarterbacks face. The ones who beat those odds are rare. The ones who beat those odds while entering a room as stacked and expensive as Cleveland's are rarer still. What Sanders did not do was accept that framing, not publicly in any dramatic way, but in the daily work that coaching staffs actually pay attention to. Practice habits, film study, how a young quarterback handles a day when everything goes wrong in a drill, and the veterans in the room are watching to see what his reaction looks like. These are the quiet evaluations that never make it onto highlight reels, but define how an organization starts to see a player. The Browns staff began noticing something about their fifth-round pick early. He was not behaving like someone grateful to be there. He was behaving like someone who expected to compete. That distinction matters more than most fans realize. Gratitude keeps you on a roster. Competition puts you on a field. And before anyone in Cleveland had fully processed what was happening, the competition Sanders was quietly preparing for was about to get a door kicked wide open by the last thing anyone in that building wanted to deal with. Injuries were coming, and they would change everything. The preseason is where NFL dreams either take shape or quietly dissolve. For most fifth-round picks at the quarterback position, it is the latter. The regular season feels distant, the depth chart is stacked against them, and the window of opportunity to show anything meaningful is brutally small. A few series here, a handful of plays there, and then the evaluation is essentially over before it ever really began. Sanders got his window, and he did not waste a single second of it. During Browns' preseason action in 2025, Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field and immediately looked like someone who did not belong in the fifth round. He completed 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns. He moved through his progressions with the kind of calm decisiveness that you simply cannot coach into a quarterback who does not already have it wired into his instincts. He did not throw a single interception. More importantly, he did not look overwhelmed. In a preseason environment filled with blitz packages designed to expose young quarterbacks and force mistakes, Sanders looked like someone who had been reading NFL defenses for years. The Browns' coaching staff saw it, the front office saw it, and the football world started paying slightly closer attention. But what truly changed the trajectory of everything was not what Sanders did on the field. It was what happened to the quarterbacks above him on the depth chart. Kenny Pickett went down with a hamstring injury. Dillon Gabriel followed with a hamstring issue of his own. Suddenly, the logjam that was supposed to keep Sanders buried on the depth chart for an entire season had cleared in a matter of weeks through circumstances nobody planned for. Head coach Kevin Stefanski, working with the options available to him, turned to his fifth-round rookie not as a bold strategic decision, but almost as a practical necessity. What happened next was anything but accidental. Then came the development that reshaped the entire season. Deshaun Watson, who had already missed significant time due to an Achilles injury suffered during his suspension period, suffered a second rupture of that same Achilles during his rehab process that winter. The injury was devastating for Watson personally and practically catastrophic for any timeline the Browns had built around his return to the starting lineup. With Watson out for the foreseeable future, the starting job was no longer a competition. It was a vacancy. And Shedeur Sanders walked into it. He started the final 7 games of the 2025 regular season. The results were imperfect in the way that all rookie starting stretches tend to be imperfect. A 3-4 record, roughly 1,500 yards passing, 7 touchdowns against 10 interceptions, a completion percentage just under 57%. The turnovers were a legitimate concern, and nobody, inside or outside the organization, pretended otherwise. 10 interceptions in 7 starts is not a number that gets you extension talks or Pro Bowl invitations under normal circumstances. But Sanders was not operating under normal circumstances, and the people watching closely understood the difference. He was running a rebuilding offense with a patchwork supporting cast, behind an offensive line that was not exactly providing him with comfortable pockets to operate from, against defenses that had weeks of film to prepare specifically for a rookie starter they had identified as inexperienced. Within all of that, the flashes were undeniable. And one performance in particular made it impossible for anyone paying attention to dismiss what was developing inside this unexpected story. Something was brewing in Cleveland, and it was about to announce itself in the most convincing way possible. There are performances in a young quarterback's career that function as proof of concept, not just good games in easy matchups or inflated stats against prevent defenses. Real performances against real competition that force even the skeptics to pause and reconsider what they think they know about a player. For Shedeur Sanders, that game came against the Tennessee Titans. On a day when everything that had followed him since draft night was weighing heaviest, when the narrative of the failed prospect and the questionable fifth-round pick was loudest in the media, Sanders delivered the kind of performance that shifts conversations permanently. He completed 23 of 42 passes. He threw for 364 yards. He found the end zone 3 times through the air and added a rushing touchdown on top of it. His completion percentage was not pristine, and the attempt volume reflected a game where he had to carry the offense repeatedly without a reliable running game to lean on. But 364 yards, 4 total touchdowns, and a performance that showed every tool the pre-draft evaluators had fallen in love with before the slide happened was a statement that the football world could not ignore. It was the first time in his professional career that Sanders had crossed the 300-yard mark in a single game, and the timing of it, deep in a season where everyone had already more or less written the Browns off and filed Sanders under future depth chart question mark, made it land differently than a strong performance in Week 2 of the preseason would have.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
The analysts who had spent draft night explaining why he fell started revisiting their takes. Former quarterbacks who work as television commentators began pointing at the Titans' game as evidence that whatever concerns drove teams away from him in April had either been overstated or were already being corrected. The footage from that performance circulated across every major football media platform for days afterward. But the recognition that carried the most weight came from a source that nobody predicted. When injuries created a roster opening for the 2026 Pro Bowl, the selection committee named Shedeur Sanders as a replacement. A rookie quarterback who had started fewer than half a season, who had been taken in the 5th round, who had been written off before he threw his first NFL pass, was now standing in a group that included some of the most respected quarterbacks in the sport. The optics of that selection were enormous. Pro Bowl replacement or not, the statement it made about how the league was beginning to see Sanders could not be overstated. This was not a sympathy selection or a feel-good story manufactured by a PR department. This was a football recognition that his play had earned. Inside the Browns facility, something shifted after that announcement. The way the building talked about their 5th-round pick began to change. Not dramatically, not in the form of any official statements or press conference declarations, but in the quieter ways that matter more inside an NFL organization. The weight given to his opinions in meetings, the way veterans engaged with him in practice. The sense that this quarterback was no longer a project you hoped might develop into something useful 3 years from now. He was already becoming something, and the organization knew it. The question was what came next, because the offseason that followed was about to introduce a change that nobody in Cleveland had fully prepared for. And it would either accelerate Sanders' rise or slam the door shut on everything he had just built. In the NFL, a head coaching change does not just alter the playbook. It resets every assumption the building has been operating under. Depth charts that felt settled become open questions. Players who were buried suddenly find oxygen. Veterans who assumed job security have to prove themselves all over again. Everything restarts. Kevin Stefanski, the coach who had drafted Sanders and handed him the starting job out of necessity, was let go at the end of the 2025 season. The decision was not entirely surprising given the Browns' record and the pressure on the organization to show movement toward competitiveness. But it meant that the one coach who had personally witnessed Sanders' development from the inside, who had made the decision to start him and watched him grow through those 7 games, was no longer in the building. In his place, Cleveland hired Todd Monken. Monken arrived carrying significant credibility. He had spent the previous 3 seasons as the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, helping design and operate one of the most dynamic and creative offenses in the NFL. His system in Baltimore produced extraordinary results, leveraging quarterback mobility and decision-making in ways that had become a blueprint for modern NFL offense. He was not a conservative thinker. He was not someone who defaulted to the safe choice out of habit or political convenience inside an organization. He also had a prior connection to Cleveland, having briefly served as the Browns' offensive coordinator back in 2019. He understood the organizational culture, knew the market, and arrived with a clear philosophy about how he wanted to build the offense going forward. From his opening press conference, Monken sent a message that landed clearly throughout the quarterback room. Nothing was guaranteed. No depth chart position was locked in based on name, contract, or draft pedigree. Every player in that room would be evaluated on what they showed from day one of the off-season program through the final depth chart decision before the regular season. That statement meant very different things to very different people in that room. For Deshaun Watson, now healthy after his surgeries and returning to football after an extended absence that had lasted the better part of 2 seasons, it meant walking back into a competition he may have assumed would be handled by the weight of his contract and his pre-injury reputation alone. Watson switched his focus immediately to proving his health and timing were fully restored. For Sanders, that same statement was an invitation. He arrived in the off-season program carrying visible momentum. He had also made a small but symbolically significant change. He switched his jersey number from 12 to number 2, a callback to his number at Colorado, and a quiet statement about identity and roots that the football world noticed immediately. It was a minor detail in a vacuum, but in the context of a player who had been defined by other people's narratives since draft night, choosing his own number felt like another piece of a deliberate reclamation. As organized team activities began, and minicamp followed, the early reports out of Berea started carrying a different tone than anyone had expected heading into the spring. Watson looked fine, functional, a quarterback working through the rust of a long absence and rebuilding timing with receivers. Sanders looked like a quarterback who had never stopped playing. And the people watching those practices were starting to say things out loud that would have seemed absurd 12 months earlier. The competition in Cleveland had suddenly become very real. There is a specific kind of signal that comes out of NFL facilities when something unexpected is developing at the quarterback position. It does not arrive in the form of official press releases or head coach proclamations. It travels through beat reporters, through league insiders, through the carefully worded observations of people who watch practices for a living and have spent enough time around the game to know the difference between a player who looks good and a player who is actually changing the conversation. Those signals started coming out of Berea, Ohio in the spring of 2026, and they pointed in one direction. The early weeks of the offseason program suggested Watson was in pole position. That matched every logical expectation. He was healthy, he was experienced, and his contract carried a gravitational pull that tends to influence organizational thinking, whether anyone inside the building admits it or not. Reports from early OTAs reflected a quarterback room where Watson was moving smoothly, looking comfortable, and operating as though the job was already his to lose. Then something shifted as minicamp progressed. People who had been inside those practices started walking away with a different read. Sanders, who had shown up to the off-season program with the focused energy that his supporters had been describing since his rookie year, was doing more than holding his own. He was finishing the spring program stronger than Watson, not just competing respectably or showing flashes, finishing stronger. The distinction between those two things is significant in how coaching staffs process evaluations. League voices with credibility began openly stating that the competition in Cleveland was no longer a formality, not a casual observation from a single reporter with limited access, but a repeated pattern of reports from multiple sources with different connections to the organization, all pointing toward the same conclusion. The Browns' quarterback battle was real.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
General Manager Andrew Barry addressed the situation publicly during that period, and the language he chose was deliberate. He made clear that no decision on a starting quarterback was imminent. He emphasized that every player in the room would have to earn his role through competition. He did not offer Watson the reassurance that his contract might have suggested he deserved. For anyone listening carefully, that was a statement in itself. The financial dimension of what was unfolding was almost impossible to overstate. Watson's fully guaranteed $230 million contract is one of the largest in NFL history. Franchises do not typically absorb that kind of financial commitment and then pivot to a fifth-round pick unless the evidence is overwhelming and the organization has made a deliberate decision that the future cannot wait for the past to catch up. Yet that is precisely the conversation Cleveland was having. It is worth understanding what that conversation signals about the broader state of the NFL. The league has long operated on a principle that investment equals priority. The quarterback who costs the most gets the most rope, the most patience, the most benefit of the doubt when performance is inconsistent. That principle has kept struggling veterans in starting roles long past the point where the evidence suggested someone else should be taking the snaps. The Browns, publicly and with their general manager's words on record, were not following that principle. They were following the practice field. And what the practice field was showing them was a young quarterback who had arrived in Cleveland with nothing guaranteed, built something real out of circumstances nobody planned, and was now standing at the edge of taking something that the NFL's financial structure suggested was never supposed to be his. Training camp was coming, and with it, a decision that would define far more than just a depth chart. Step back from the specific names and the specific contract numbers for a moment, because what is happening in Cleveland right now is not just a training camp quarterback competition. It is a story that cuts to the center of how the NFL actually works, and whether the assumptions the league has operated under for decades are beginning to crack. 40 quarterbacks in Cleveland since 1999. That number does not happen by accident. It is the result of a pattern of decisions, some made under pressure, some made with incomplete information, some made because the safer political choice inside an organization is always to stick with the expensive veteran rather than make the uncomfortable call to move forward with someone younger who might simply be better right now. The Browns have lived inside that pattern for over 2 decades. Every time they cycled to a new quarterback, the hope was that this one would be different. The stability never came. The cycle continued. And now they are sitting inside a situation where the cycle could either repeat itself one more time or break permanently depending on a decision that is being watched by the entire NFL. This is the part of the Shedeur Sanders story that goes beyond quarterback ratings and completion percentages. Because if the Browns sit Watson, with his $230 million contract and his pre-injury reputation, in favor of a fifth-round pick who earned his way to the front of the competition through performance alone, it sends a message to every team in the league about what the new calculus at quarterback looks like. Performance over investment, competition over assumption, what you are doing right now over what you did 3 years ago. That is a radical departure from how most NFL front offices have historically operated. And Gridiron Ground has been tracking this story closely because the implications stretch far beyond one team's depth chart decision. For Sanders specifically, this moment is about something even more personal than franchise history or league-wide trends. The draft slide defined how the football world saw him from the moment his name was finally called in round 5. Every evaluation of his performance since then has been filtered through that lens. Every interception was evidence that the teams who passed on him were right. Every good game was a surprising outlier from a player who was never supposed to be in this position. A training camp victory over Watson, A legitimate claim on the starting job backed by consistent performance and organizational confidence would not just move Sanders up a depth chart. It would permanently rewrite the story that was written about him on draft night without his permission. That rewrite matters because it is the kind of story that shapes how a player is perceived for the rest of his career. Quarterbacks who overcome adversity and prove their doubters wrong carry that narrative as a source of strength for years. It becomes part of how they lead, how they compete, how they handle the inevitable difficult moments that every NFL quarterback faces over a long career. Sanders has been carrying the draft night story as a wound. The training camp competition in Cleveland is his chance to turn it into armor. And the Browns fanbase, which has been waiting literally decades for a quarterback who might actually be the answer, is watching all of this with a mixture of desperate hope and hard-earned caution that only comes from living through 40 quarterbacks in 25 years. This story belongs to all of them, and it is nowhere close to finished. Training camp in Cleveland is not just a football event in the summer of 2026. It is a referendum on what the Browns organization actually believes about its own future. The people weighing in from around the league are not aligned on a single answer, and that disagreement reflects how genuinely complicated this situation is from every angle. Analysts who have followed Watson's career closely point to what he looked like at his peak and argue that a fully healthy Watson operating within Monken's system could still be one of the more dangerous quarterbacks in the conference. His arm talent never disappeared. His ability to extend plays, buy time, and create off schedule has historically been elite. If his body holds up and the timing with receivers clicks the way it did before the injuries and the legal controversies derailed everything, the argument for Watson is not irrational. But then there is the other side of that argument. Watson has played 19 games since 2022, 19 games across a stretch of time during which the rest of the league's quarterbacks have been developing chemistry with their offenses, reps in their systems, the accumulated experience of real competitive situations. You cannot simulate that in a rehabilitation gym or in walkthrough sessions during the off-season program. The physical tools may be intact, but the competitive rhythm that separates functional quarterbacks from elite ones is something that only returns through sustained playing time. And every week that Watson has been away, Sanders has been accumulating exactly that. The specific questions Monken needs answered before the regular season begins go beyond who looks better in shorts during OTAs or who throws the prettier ball in a controlled practice setting. He needs to know how each quarterback handles a live pass rush, how each one responds when the pocket collapses and the designed play is gone, and the decision has to be made in under 2 seconds with a linebacker bearing down. How each one communicates with skill position players when the game is close, and the pressure is real, and the margin for error is zero. Those answers only come from padded practices and preseason action. And the Browns coaching staff knows that whatever they see in those settings will carry far more weight than any spring evaluation. The financial reality hovering over all of this is unavoidable. The Browns will absorb Watson's guaranteed money regardless of the outcome of this competition. That money is gone from the cap perspective, whether Watson starts or sits. The decision the organization faces is whether to also give Watson the starting job as a kind of psychological accounting, a justification for the expenditure, or whether to make the purely football-based decision and let the field determine the outcome regardless of what the contract says. Cleveland has let the contract win that argument before, multiple times. The results are part of the 40 quarterback statistic that defines the franchise's modern history. This time, the signals coming out of the building suggest the organization is at least genuinely open to letting the competition decide. Whether that openness survives the political and financial pressure of a real training camp remains to be seen. What is already certain is that Shedeur Sanders, the fifth-round pick who sat through 5 rounds of silence on the worst night of his young career, has forced an entire NFL franchise to have a conversation it was never supposed to be having. And that alone is one of the most remarkable stories in recent NFL history. What happens next will write the rest of it. Here is where this story stands right now. A quarterback who was supposed to be a long-shot developmental project walked into one of the most complicated quarterback situations in the NFL and quietly turned it upside down. He did not do it with dramatic press conference speeches or social media campaigns. He did it with practice habits, with preseason execution, with a 364-yard game against the Titans that shifted the conversation, and with a spring evaluation period that left informed observers openly questioning whether the $230 million veteran was still the frontrunner. The Browns have been searching for a franchise quarterback for over 2 decades. Every cycle that search has completed has ended in the same place: instability, transition, and another name added to the 40 quarterback list. This time, something genuinely feels different, not because the outcome is guaranteed. It is not. Watson could win this competition cleanly and go on to have the healthy, productive season his talent suggests he is capable of when everything aligns. But the fact that the conversation is real, that the competition is genuine, that the organization is publicly refusing to hand Watson the job based on his contract alone, represents a shift in how the Browns are making decisions at the most important position in sports. Shedeur Sanders walked into the NFL through the side entrance. He is now standing at the front door of a starting job that nobody thought would be his this soon. Whether he walks through it is the question the entire league is waiting to answer. Drop your prediction in the comments. This is Gridiron Ground. Stay with us.